Good evening. I'd like to call the business meeting of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is Tuesday, December 10th, 2019. The Portland Board of Public Education is meeting at Casco Bay High School in the great space. May I please ask the superintendent to call the roll?
Maybe.
I have it here.
Are you ready?
Okay. You have it there?
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Atkinson?
Here.
Mr. Balfons?
Here.
Ms. Bondo?
Présente.
Mr. Burke?
Here.
Ms. Figdor?
Here.
Ms. Morioni? Ms. Thompson?
Here.
Ms. Trevorrow? Ms. Brown? Mr. Casiel Reyes?
Here.
Ms. Habib Said?
Here.
Mr. Parrott?
Here.
Ms. Yangala?
Yes, présente.
And Chair Rodriguez.
Presente. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Présente, that's good.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. For the report of the chair, I just had a few announcements I wanted to go through. First of all, we have a a very light agenda tonight, so I'm hoping we won't be here very long. Since our last meeting, which was on November 26th, we've had a couple of pretty significant events. We had the school board inauguration on December 2nd. We welcomed a new board member, District 3 Representative Adam Burke. We also welcome back two at-large members, Anna Trevorrow and myself, who got reelected back in November. And we welcomed 5 new student representatives to the board. I'm going to kind of introduce them to the public. We have a PATH representative, Sam Parrott. We have a Deering High School representative, Sahar Habib Sai. I just corrected the superintendent and I couldn't get it right myself. From Casco Bay High School, we have Fabio Casio Reyes. And from Portland Adult Ed, we have Magali Yangala. Missing from us tonight, and she did let me know ahead of time that she wouldn't make it tonight, is our Portland High School representative, Stephanie Brown. And also to let the public know, Ms. Trevorrow and Ms. Morioni let me know they wouldn't be able to make it tonight. They had a couple of conflicts. So welcome everyone to a new school year for the school board. Also, since our last meeting, we had our very first snow day in the district on December 3rd. We did not hold classes, and then we also ended up canceling our school board meeting, which is why we're meeting tonight. This is a rescheduled meeting from last week. The following day, on December 4th, there was an event that I participated in, that I attended along with several members of the Portland Public Schools staff leadership team, and a couple of board members were there as well. At USM, we went to a lecture with Mr. Paul Gorski. It was titled Equity Literacy. Very much an important topic as it relates to the Portland Promise goals, our equity goal. I thought it was a really informative discussion. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I jokingly said, Mr. Gorski was speaking my language. I mean, a lot of the points that he brought up were very close to the way that I feel about the issues of equity and how they relate to education. So, again, I was grateful that I was invited to attend, and I'm grateful that I saw so many of the Portland Public Schools leadership team present as well, and, of course, board members that made it out that night. The next day, on December 5th, a couple of us board members and superintendent and our director of finance met with members of the Portland legislative delegation to discuss our early projections and outlook for the FY21 school budget. Kind of sharing with them what the current picture is for our financial situation and trying to, discuss the viability of some of the potential scenarios that we can be hopeful for and how they would impact our budget next year. So I'm thankful for the delegation members who made the time to join us and to share with us their input and give us feedback on things that we need to dig a little bit deeper on as we move forward with the budget development process. Another thing, just prior to this meeting, we had a workshop with the new student representatives. It's an orientation, kind of go over some of the basic parts of their roles as board members for the next year, discussing the policies that govern their participation in the school board and trying to help them be as effective in developing their roles in these in the school board through the next year. I want to kind of just put it out there for the rest of the board members that, as I've done since I've been on the school board, I want us all to be active in engaging our student reps, truly making it meaningful when we say that we want to include student voice in our deliberations, and that we try to maybe not necessarily mentor them, but certainly support them when as we move forward. I'm going to hold conversations with them individually to see what committees they want to join. It might not be like an official assignment. Sometimes they might have issues coming up at certain committees that they'll be interested in, and I want us to engage them in specifically trying to get their input as we develop maybe some policies or any issues that are coming up. So again, board members, just keep your eyes out for our student representatives and try to get them involved in our work and have them make the most of their time here joining us in the board. One last announcement, our next school board meeting, which is going to be the last one of the 2019 calendar year, is going to be, or rather is scheduled for December 17th, and we're going to be right here at Casco Bay High School. Traditionally, our meetings are not held at Casco Bay High School. We have an MOU with the city that has us meet at City Hall, and for a number of different changes in our schedule and I guess, and their schedule as well, we've had to move them over here, but this is not the norm, so to speak. So I just wanted to put that out there. And one final announcement, I already talked to the board and superintendent and his staff as part of the I guess responsibilities as board chair. I went ahead and did the committee assignments for the next year, and so I've talked to all the board members about the FY20, or rather, the 2020 calendar year and who's going to be serving in which committee. So I wanted to just make those announcements officially here in a public setting. For the 2020 year, the Finance Committee is going to be chaired by Anna Trevorrow, and the members in that committee are going to be Emily Figdor and Mark Balfons. Quick comment about that. Last year, we had 5 members on the Finance Committee. Before that, I think we had a year where we had 4 members. I think it makes a lot more sense to have odd numbers, and 5 was not necessarily neither better nor worse than having fewer or less, but we felt that 3 members in the committee would make our work a little bit more I guess, fluid, so to speak. It'll make us work a bit more effectively, and also allows other members that want to join other committees to not have to stretch themselves too thinly as they participate in multiple committees. So curriculum committee is going to be chaired by Mr. Mark Balfons, and committee members are going to be Mickey Bondo and Adam Burke. Operations committee is going to be chaired by Sarah Thompson, and members are going to be Emily Figdor and Adam Burke. Policy committee is going to be chaired by Emily Figdor, and members are going to be Marnie Morioni and Tim Atkinson. And our public affairs committee is going to be chaired by Mickey Bondo. Members are going to be Marnie Morioni and Tim Atkinson. Appointments committee is going to be chaired by Ms. Morioni, and members are going to be Sarah Thompson and Mickey Bondo, I'm sorry. And so that I think is representative of the interest that the board members responded to me when I asked them what they wanted to do over the next year, and also it's indicative of the capacity that each of you have. I know that some of us have a little bit busier lives, and our work schedules might be more challenging, so I wanted to take that into consideration as we made the assignments to make sure that we weren't overloading people's capacities and we can remain as effective as possible. So having said all that, we don't have a student report today. We'll start with those in our first January meeting, and we should share with the students what the calendar looks like so that they know when they have to report. And so we'll move on to the report of the superintendent. Mr. Botana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to begin my comments today by recognizing the Maliseet, Micmac, Penobscot, and Passamaquoddy tribes, known collectively as the Wabanaki, or people of the Dawnland, the original inhabitants of the land on which our city and schools stand. We're honored to have their children among our students in our schools today. I would like to welcome all of our new board members who begin their tenure tonight, our student representatives who you just met. For me, working with student board representatives has been and will continue to be a highlight of the work of the board. This evening, as Chair Rodriguez mentioned, we gathered before the meeting to provide an orientation for the students, and I can tell just from their questions and their engagement today that they're going to make amazing contributions to the work of the board this coming year. I also would like to formally welcome board member Adam Burke, representing District 3. I look forward to working with you. And I would also like to congratulate Board Chair Roberto Rodriguez on being selected to serve a second term. I've enjoyed our partnership this past year, and I'm grateful that we can continue that work. As with any leadership position, stability and continuity are valuable aspects, and I'm grateful to the board for providing that continuity here again. I would like to take a moment to congratulate, belatedly, the Deering High School football team for their victory in the 108th Turkey Day game not last Thursday, a bunch of Thursdays ago. And congratulations also to the Portland High team for a game well played and for their outstanding sportsmanship. Our December 17th board meeting is scheduled here at Casco Bay, as you heard earlier. We did not coordinate, and so I've got a bunch of things on mine that were on yours. Speaking of Casco Bay, the annual march to the post office will take place this Friday afternoon. All of Casco's 100 or so seniors will march down Congress to the post office to mail a college application or a thank you letter to someone who's helped them along their way to this point. This is a wonderful annual ritual that symbolizes our commitment to prepare and empower students for the next step in their life. Tonight, probably wrapping up about now, we hosted a parent university session at 5:30 at King Middle School entitled Healthy Behaviors and Positive Social Development for Your Child's Success. Parent University is a series of events over the course of the year that's designed to give parents, guardians, students, and staff deep insights into issues that matter to them in supporting healthy student development. Tonight's session was facilitated by our very own Dr. Chris Reiger, our Director of Clinical and Behavior Supports for Portland Public Schools, and it focused on the district's multi-tiered systems of supports designed to help students develop self-awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making, and also helping parents to understand how they can support these strategies at home. Last week, as you heard, the board Finance Committee met with members of the Portland Legislative Delegation. I'm always humbled by the willingness and commitment of our legislators to sit with us and understand our current situation. I very much appreciate their collective efforts to support our work as a school district, and I look forward to continuing to work with them to maximize the support that we receive from the state of Maine. On a related but not so positive note, I wanted to let the board know that our waiver request to be allowed to pursue contract management at risk for our remaining 3 schools was rejected by the state this morning. We've been in conversations with DOE and the Department of Administrative and Financial Services since September, so I was disappointed with this outcome. We have been exploring options, and I will be bringing those to the District Advisory Building Committee and eventually to the board as they evolve. The Maine DOE has awarded us additional Title III funds in the amount of $5,000 to offset some of the summer costs associated with our intake work with asylum seekers this summer. We were also notified by the city that we will be eligible to apply as part of the community partner reimbursement application for some of that asylum programming this summer. The district incurred about $30,000 in expenses for additional programming, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to offset it with those additional funds. Staff from the district and city will be meeting next week to pick up the conversations about the Memorandum of Understanding on school resource officers, and I will keep you updated on the progress of those conversations. And finally, to the rejoicing of many students, we closed school last Tuesday, so I want to let everyone know that as a result, we're now projecting Friday, June 12th as the last day of school for students. In next week's board packet, we will have a first reading of the 2021 school calendar, and that calendar has been developed and reviewed alongside the calendars of all of the path-sending schools so that it limits discrepancies to 5 days across the districts, and we'll be discussing that calendar further in the next couple of meetings. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Next, for the report of the Secretary, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of November 26, 2019. Is there a motion? Ms. Victor, second by Ms. Thompson. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Any public comment on the motion? Seeing none. Any board discussion? None. I'll put it to a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the meeting of November 26, 2019, please indicate. And that's unanimous. And the students weren't here, so they've abstained from their vote. Very well done. Next, consideration and action to approve the minutes of the meeting of December 2nd, 2019. Is there a motion?
I'll tell you.
Ms. Victor, second by Ms. Bondo. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none. Any public comment on the motion?
Do this.
Seeing none. Is there any board discussion? None. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the meeting of December 2nd, 2019, please indicate. And that's unanimous as well. Thank you. Next, for consent items, will the superintendent please read the list of donations made to the district?
We have none.
Wow.
I don't think that's ever happened.
That's never happened
before.
since I've been here.
Yep.
Should we pass the hat?
Then we'll have to recognize you at the next meeting.
No, I wouldn't put it under my name. That's unfortunate, but
I know.
we'll move on. Next, for the board focus on educational items, and probably the biggest item on tonight's agenda, we have a presentation on the middle school model in Portland. You going to set us up, Superintendent? You have the floor.
So tonight, here we go. Tonight's board focus session is a critical one. For those who were around during last year's Enrollment and Facility Study Commission's work, you may recall that there were several options considered that included reconfiguring our middle schools. Of all of the options considered, those involving that reconfiguration were the ones that consistently saved the most money. This fall, we've been working to prepare for the upcoming budget year, and as part of that work, we had multiple conversations between staff and board members to review multiple options for potential cost savings, and as a result of that work, we revisited the Enrollment and Facility Study recommendation. Through those conversations, we determined that it's very important context setting for the board and the community to understand why we organize our middle grades the way that we do. Our goal for tonight is to establish that this form of organization is not random or force of habit. Instead, it's grounded in sound research about how best to meet the needs of what researchers call early adolescents. So those are generally students between the ages of 10 and 15. Earlier in my career, I had the good fortune to be involved in the Middle Grade School State Policy Initiative, MEGASIPI for short. I'm not sure that it was shorter. Sponsored by the Carnegie Corporation, and which served to inform the development of Turning Points 2000, which extended the seminal work of the Turning Points report, which is really the foundation of our middle school movement in this country. As a result of that work, I feel that I have a solid, albeit somewhat dated, understanding of the organizational principles of middle schools and their rationale. But there are others who are better positioned to help us understand this as it exists in our schools today. So I'm excited to have Assistant Superintendent Aaron Townsend lead us through a discussion of our middle school programming with support from our middle school principals, Suellen Santiago from Lincoln Middle School, Caitlin LeClaire from King Middle School, and Ben Donaldson from Moore Middle. Aaron himself was the founding principal of an award-winning middle school high school in Oakland, California, so he's deeply versed in the value of a middle school organization and uniquely positioned to lead this presentation. And so with that, I will turn it over to Aaron.
All right. Good evening, board and superintendent and public. I'm excited to be here in front of you all this evening to lead tonight's presentation and discussion around middle school and what that looks like here in Portland. So again, as the superintendent said, excited to be joined not just by our wonderful principals, but by the full leadership teams from our middle schools. I've been have really enjoyed and been incredibly impressed with the teams that we have at each of our middle schools. I think it speaks to the experience we're creating for kids. So again, from Moore, joining Ben is Jake Giesman, the assistant principal. And from King, we have joining Caitlin, we have Craig Hansen, who has just joined us in our first year with us. And then from Lincoln, we have Robin Bailey, who's joining us as assistant principal there. So excited. Thank you all for coming out tonight to be here with us. So as the superintendent said, kind of the function or the goal of our presentation tonight is to help clarify what is our middle school model, like what are we talking about, and kind of why do we choose to invest in it in the way that we do, and obviously kind of how is that situated to serve our goals as we articulate them in terms of the Portland Promise. As we get started, want to just begin with just kind of setting context about kind of the enrollment and demographics for the middle schools. So as you can see from these slides, each of the middle schools serves, approximately 500 students. They're all very substantively diverse, as you can see, with King having, higher percentages of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch or who are English language learners. But across the board, we're relatively similar sized with some pretty even distributions of kind of demographic makeup of our schools. So that's the context that we kind of sit in. Again, as alluded to in the superintendent's introduction, if you'll step back and recall, during the enrollment and facilities study last year, it was identified that middle schools had the lowest space utilization. So that, again, is a function as part of what we'll talk about around how we're organized and how we choose to kind of do business. And again, as he referenced in the intro, that kind of reverting back to that historical junior high model created the potential for the greatest reductions in staffing. And in the analyses last year, that kind of netted out to approximately 30 FTE. Just another quick reflection of what are some of the investments that kind of go to middle school in looking and comparing from our fiscal year 2018 data, so not the most recent, but still consistent probably with what we have now. Middle schools have a higher average cost per student, and again, due to the model that we'll be talking about. So what is this model? What are we talking about? As the superintendent's referenced the Carnegie work and the Turning Points document, there are two kind of historical studies that really grounded and shifted the country from the historical junior high model to what we call and has really been referred to as the middle school movement. So in the mid-'80s, there was a lot of research around early adolescence and what were the particular needs for students at that time, in thinking about how do schools support that as kids transition out of elementary school and into this different space before they're in high school. And the historical model of junior high looked a lot similar to high schools, departmentalization, kind of no internal structures of kind of personalization. And so kids who were just emerging into puberty and so forth, right, having to figure out how to navigate that. So in articulating a number of kind of the key needs for students at that age, these documents, first, this document called This We Believe from the Association of Middle Level Education, formerly the National League of Middle Schools, and then from the Carnegie Corporation, the Turning Points document articulated a rationale of kind of structural, instructional, and kind of elements of school to be able to kind of meet the needs of those students. So we're going to take a little bit of time, and each one of the principals is going to take a moment to kind of speak about those different aspects of the model and how it plays out. So kind of the three key pieces are the teaming structures that we employ and what that unlocks in terms of the opportunity for creating heterogeneous groups of students and unlocking opportunities for the common planning time. Advisory and crew, which creates some of the structures for personalization and support and helping kids be well known and fostering the sense of community that young adolescents need so desperately as they're emerging kind of into the world and into adulthood. And then the structures around related arts that allows for a level of exploration that's kind of developmentally appropriate for where kids are at that stage, and as well organizationally serves a function, as you'll hear about, to be able to kind of make the model work around teaming. So first, I'd like to invite Sue Ellen up to talk about the first element of our model, the teaming aspect.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for having us tonight. The teaming structure in our middle schools is really unique, and it's unique. You don't see this in elementary schools, you don't see this in our high schools. And the graphic here is showing you that at a grade level, we only have 3 grade levels, so we have our kids for a very short time. We organize our teams into, we call them houses, and they're interdisciplinary teams made up of 4 teachers in each one. And so there's an English language arts teacher, a social studies teacher, a math teacher, and a science teacher. So at all 3 of our schools, this is the structure that you would see. And when students come in the 6th grade, they're assigned to one of these 2 houses. And as Aaron referenced, the houses are heterogeneous in nature, so that they really look like, each one of the houses looks like the whole population of our school. And it's a beautiful thing because the house team does more than just teach kids how to read, write, and do math. They do a lot of team building. My colleagues are going to talk about the relationship building and the social emotional learning that we do as well. But it creates an opportunity for a lot of interdisciplinary and cross-curricular connections to happen. And students stay in these house teams in all 3 of our schools for 2 years. We call that looping. And they stay in that loop, and it helps students create relationships with those 4 teachers for the 2-year period, as well as with their families, which again is a really important thing given that we only have our families at our schools for 3 short years. Can I click to the next one? This slide gives you another graphic kind of the whole school. So as you see, there's a house team in each grade level. And over on the side, the rainbow colored classes is illustrating all the other teachers that we have supporting our students throughout their day. We have teams of related arts teachers, which again, one of my colleagues will talk about in a moment, special education teachers, and English language teachers as well that support our students. And this is an important slide because what you need to understand is that part of the teaming structure, which I'll get to in a minute, is to create the opportunity for teachers to meet and plan. And the interdisciplinary planning is important. So in order to free up the math, English, social studies, and science teacher to be together, and they all share the same students, the students in essence need to go somewhere for that to happen. So in their day, all the people on the right are the ones that are supporting them to allow for that collaboration to happen. Let me go to the next slide. There's a lot of research on the left side of this slide that both the superintendent and Aaron referenced about this interdisciplinary instruction and the structure that is kind of the foundation of our school. I would say that in all of this research, the biggest thing that I can tell you is that our teachers are teaching students all day long, and when they're not, they're busy collaborating. And that looks a little bit different. They're collaborating with their house teams, and they're doing that to think about interdisciplinary projects, expeditions, all sorts of different exciting hands-on opportunities for kids. But it's also about paying attention to the whole student and getting to know the student and sharing strategies about what works. What does the student need? We try to create a structure where students are really well known in that team and really held. And that's important at this age. They're very fragile. We want to make sure that we're being preemptive to anything that could happen in their lives. And so we have to know them. And just seeing them in your class one time a day doesn't necessarily allow you to know them. So this structure helps us to do that. The common planning time, in addition to the interdisciplinary planning, also allows for the 2 math teachers, for example, at the grade level, to meet and collaborate together. So that allows them to ensure that the outcomes for all students at that grade level are being hit. They plan together, they look at student work together, they assess together, and they also have access to coaching. So the middle school math coach the ELL teacher, the special ed teacher, the gifted and talented Chapter 104 consultant. All those people can push into that planning, and it's really professional development all day for those teachers. So we're not just doing PD on Wednesdays. We're doing PD throughout the day, helping the teachers learn strategies to meet the needs of our learners. And I think I'm going to shift. Advisory and crew. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue Ellen, and good evening to all of you. So I'm going to highlight some information about advisory/crew. So those are synonymous terms. I'm going to go with crew because that's what we use at King, so that's my comfort zone. But all of what I'm going to share with you is happening across the 3 middle schools, just with a different name. So crew is both a structure and a part of the culture within all 3 of our middle schools. As you can see on this slide, the structure of crew creates an opportunity for smaller groups of students within those houses that Sue Ellen just referenced, those teams, to be in smaller communities or families within that team. So it's roughly 15 students to 1 teacher, an advisory or crew teacher. Each school has devoted in their schedule 60 to 135 minutes per week for that advisory or crew to happen. So what does that structure look like in action? The structure within each of our schools really makes time for what I think and we believe are 3 really important things to happen. First, for students to build meaningful relationships with their peers and also their advisory or crew teacher. For them to have an ongoing, consistent opportunity to reflect on their academic progress and to monitor that progress and set goals with their teachers and with their peers, and also to focus on character development. So that last bullet there, which says focus on team building and student support, you can see a beautiful picture that I actually don't know which one of our 3 schools that came from. All 3 schools have a vibrant and strong partnership with Ripple Effect, and our students are experiencing outdoor adventure and leadership experiences through Ripple Effect, and that's deeply embedded in the character development work that we're doing with our students. So as the research shows there that is cited on this slide, school connectedness and a sense of belonging is linked to higher grades, to higher test scores, to lower dropout rates, and that's regardless of socioeconomic status and all of the other factors that present as challenges for our students when they come to school. Crew is also an engine for equity and inclusion. It's a place where all students are known and cared for and have an advocate not just in their crew teacher, but in their, as we say at King, their crewbies or their crewmates. And it's really a place where all students feel like they can succeed. At King, we use the term crew as an EL school with the idea that we are crew, not passengers. So it really takes everybody's paddles in the water. And that's the spirit of advisory and crew. It means that we have to work together as a team to reach our destination. So crew is more than a structure. It's really part of the culture that impels the students and all staff beyond just crew teachers, truthfully, to work together, to solve problems together, and ultimately work together to make the school community a great place. So if you were to walk through the halls of King on a Tuesday morning crew, and this would be a similar experience across the 3 middle schools, depending on the time of day or when it's happening, you would likely see a variety of things happening. You would see students sitting together in a circle with their crew teacher talking about things happening with them personally and also in our school community. You would see students and crew teachers making a meal together, having some pancakes and having that check-in. You would see students working with their teacher on learning targets and setting goals and how they're doing with their habits of work and learning. And you would also see students engaged in initiatives focused on relationship building, as Sue Ellen referenced, as being so critical, and communication skills and problem solving. All of these experiences are so important in making sure that our students feel connected to school, but also arming them with the skills that we know they need to be successful in middle school and in life. So this time that is devoted to crew and advisory is more than just a structure within our schools. It's really part of the fabric and part of our being that we feel committed to and know that is essential in making students be successful. So, thanks.
Thank you, Caitlin. All right, so I'm going to speak a bit about related arts. And in all of our schools, students spend 4 blocks of their day in the 4 core curricular classes. Then they spend 2 blocks a day in related arts. So it's about a third of their school day that they're spending in these other classes. And quickly with the research, the first one there is just that young adolescents by nature are adventuresome, curious explorers, and as such should be offered frequent opportunities to engage with new topics and activities. And so just briefly, by the time they get to us in 6th grade, these kids are out of their minds excited to do something beyond math and reading instruction. They're getting tons of that in elementary school. And they always come saying, we didn't get enough of specials in elementary. Like we got to do gym every few days, or we got to do an art class once a week. So our kids coming into middle school are really excited to do things that are going to be different, and they're going to expose them to different types of learning and really stimulate different parts of their brains. So we see 6th graders coming in just really excited that suddenly the world is expanding for them academically. The second piece of research there is electives supplement the curriculum and help students identify and pursue interests outside of core academic subjects. That's what I just spoke about. They further develop learners, or help learners develop a sense of their career interests. So I think it's about academic and career interests. I think it's about personal interests. Sue Ellen spoke about just sort of the explosion in how kids are developing at this age. And so to expand those offerings does help students kind of dip their toes in a bunch of different areas before they get to high school, where they're making course selections and starting to think about that college career kind of next track. So lots of different options for them. And the final piece of research there just helps us understand that some of the most successful middle schools are using related arts as an opportunity to really help kids learn some things that they may not be learning in those core areas. And all 3 of our schools are deeply committed to proficiency-based learning, and we're doing really well at using those structures to teach and learn in our schools. But we know that kids aren't going to learn everything in their English class, or they're not going to learn everything they need to know about math in a math like a typical traditional math class. But they may, that math concept may click in a STEM class where they're actually building something or learning about it, or some kind of a literacy connection might very well be made in an art class when a kid is writing their artist statement about something that they deeply believe in and care about. So we believe that multiple pathways are kind of unlocked and introduced really when kids have these other classes where they can work on some of the core skills that they need, but in a different way. And we do see a bit of fatigue as early as 6th or 7th grade in, learning to write your essay in English class, but they may actually want to write about something different. Or in a creative writing class, they may find their voice and the structure of the writing they want to do. So we think that it's a way to kind of hook kids back in academically so that they can move on to high school with better and better skills, more prepared to be successful. So across our schools, it looks a little different, and this is true to kind of the history of Portland, that we do believe in schools looking a bit different, like Caitlin was saying about the advisory and crew structures. But we're committed to some of the same structures. So across schools, kids are spending about a third of their day. These are just the sampling of classes that kids would take. So you see that there are 4 classes listed per grade level. That's because they take these classes every other day, and they take their math, science, ELA, and social studies class every day. So these classes don't meet as much as the others, which is how we're able to provide a little more variety for kids and different opportunities. We're doing a lot with a little with these faculty members. I would just say anecdotally that these are some of we have incredible teachers in this district, but these folks are consistently doing really creative work to push the thinking and push what's possible with kids. And so when budgets are tight and we talk about, should we cut music or should we not have STEM, that's where we're really tested about how much we believe these opportunities are worth for our kids and what they're adding in value. And that's all the stuff that private schools are either providing or that wealthy families are able to provide for their kids. And here in this district, we provide those opportunities for kids. And it's not co-curricular, it's not after school. That's what they get during the school day. And it's part of what's really preserving and deepening and making middle level education really strong in this district. So, and we're improving it all the time. The teachers are getting better and better at teaching those classes and proposing new ones. I think we've had some really good innovation over the last few years. We're not teaching some of the traditional, related arts classes that some of us may have had in school. We are keeping up with the times, which is good. So that's a bit about related arts. Thank you, Aaron.
So we just wanted to kind of conclude, so kind of getting that overview of the model, what are folks, some of our key stakeholders, students, parents, staff saying about their experiences with middle school. So I wanted to just share a few data highlights. So first from kids, our most important stakeholder group. These couple of data points from our annual student survey that we do, K-8, reflects, just a strong agreement with kind of the level of instructional rigor and the notions of personalization. So I think tied back to elements of the model, the advisory work, the ability for the grade level teachers to collaborate and plan and present meaningful, rigorous content, right? That's what students are reflecting that they're experiencing. From the parent perspective, and again, maybe not specific model elements, right, that tie specifically to that, right, but positive feedback from parents around middle school. So, 90% feel welcome. And the net promoter metric, which is a metric that kind of says how likely are you to recommend this school or speak favorably of it. Each of our middle schools was well above the district average for that metric when we did the parent survey last year. And then certainly not last but not least, our staff, so the Tntp survey, which again for all of the board members as a reminder is the survey we do with staff. We've done it 2 years so far. So a couple of data points from that we kind of pulled out that related to the model. So, using instructional time to address grade level standards. Again, significant numbers of teachers agreeing to that, spending their collaboration time being productive, and that's, to kind of a couple of the points, particularly that Sue Ellen was making, and, in the context of advisory, using the, tracking the performance of students around academic goals. So, and I'll name, particularly on these teacher ones, that on each of those, when you compare those to high school, that doesn't have the same structures that allows for kind of the collaboration time and connection for teachers, that these are significantly higher than the high school results. So just to put that a little bit in context in terms of what the middle school teachers' experience is, they're reporting, much greater levels of satisfaction with these pieces than folks at the high school who don't have that same structure to support them. So with that, we'll kind of conclude the presentation and see if there's any questions for any of the leaders that are here tonight, or anything else you'd like to know. So thank you all.
You have any questions? Ms. Thompson?
Excuse me. I was wondering, Ben, if you could talk a little bit about the electives at Moore Middle School, how you have it just as electives, quote unquote. What are they?
Yeah, so for 8th graders, is that what you're talking about for 8th graders?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So we actually took a cut a couple years ago of a related arts teacher, and we maintained math support. So we have one teacher who's providing additional math instruction. So we were in a position where we had less related arts teachers than we needed to run the full 3 grades. So what we did at the time was ask related arts teachers if they would be willing to teach another class, and that they could and told them they could teach whatever they wanted, but that they would teach it for 8th graders for the first block of the day. And so at first, teachers really were a little nervous about that idea. But now we're in our 3rd year of it, and so we have all of our related arts teachers pitching in there. So courses offered right now include piano, game design, computer design. There's another computer design class. We have advanced health, advanced physical education. We have a new class this trimester called Know Your Best, Do Your Best. Designed kind of as an intervention for a group of 12 students who needed a little extra support in 8th grade. We have a sculpture class running. We have a drama and improv class running. So really kind of limited only by the teacher's creativity. So.
I asked that because of the world languages. So is it one of the electives world languages?
They are in 8th grade. So they take world language as well. Sorry, I left that off the slide.
Okay.
But in 8th grade, they take world language as
So
well.
it's an option versus at the other schools?
Nope, so they do...
Oh, you left it off, you said.
Yeah, I left it off the list. I
Oh, okay,
apologize. So
okay.
all 8th graders take art and world language,
Okay.
and then they pick 2 of these electives per trimester.
Okay, that's what I was looking for, was the world language, if you were doing something alternative to that, because the other schools were
I
had that.
apologize,
so-
I left it off.
That's okay. So the electives are in addition to have more creativity with what you have for resources.
Correct.
Great, thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other questions? Ms. Victor, and then Mr. Burke, and then Mr. Valpins.
In the cuts we made last year, 2 years ago?
2 years ago.
2 years ago, I know that the related arts were affected, I believe, at all 3 schools, and I'm wondering if each of the principals could talk about what was lost in those cuts and how it's impacted students' ability to select different courses that might suit them best, and just the overall quality of the related arts offerings.
I can start for Lincoln. So yes, we all took a related arts cut, and at Lincoln, you'll notice, I'm going to answer your question, I promise, but there's more classes listed under the related arts than there are at the other 2 schools in each grade level. So what we had to do is we had to basically redesign our master schedule, because when you have enough related arts teachers that they can be focused at one grade level, like I believe happens at King, right? You have, and maybe at Moore. So no, okay, at King, which is how it used to be at Lincoln. So for example, in 6th grade, a student might take music or technology all year long. So they can get more in depth. The teachers get to know the students really, really well because they're focusing on that grade level, similar to the house structure. When we took the cut, we were unable to do that because we had one less person. So it caused us to have to rethink our master schedule and rethink how we do related arts because, as I spoke about when I was up here, related arts, while super important for our kids, is also really important for our teachers because it provides the collaborative planning time that we need for them to have. So what we did was we went to a model where kids had 4, so they have world language and PE, and computer science is not included in this. But for example, in 6th grade, students have 4 related arts in their year, 1 per quarter, and they have it for a 90-minute intensive block. So they see that teacher every other day for just 1 quarter of the year for 90 minutes at a time. So for the classes like art, applied science, different things like that, that's great because they can really go deep, even though it's for a shorter time in the year. I think there's a loss there, though, because the teachers aren't able to work longer with the students. The students can't go as deep in their curriculum. What we did was we said, well, you're going to have art in 6th grade, you're going to have it again in 8th grade. And so that's a way where we kind of made up for it. But we had to really be creative with how we could hold on to the fact that losing the related arts teacher could potentially reduce our ability to have common planning time, which we were unwilling to let go of, and think differently about it. But we're stretching these people as thin as they possibly can. They're teaching all 3 grades. Every student in the school, all 500 some months, they're teaching a lot of kids. And that's really demanding and teaching multiple preps in their day. So I would say that's been the impact at Lincoln.
Go for it.
So at King, related arts looks a little different, as Sue Ellen referenced. So our related arts teachers are attached to a team for half of the school year, and that related arts teacher is a 5th teaching partner on that team, and they're deeply embedded in the learning expedition. So the students are seeing the art teacher, for example, as much as they're seeing the math, science, social studies, language arts teacher, and that teacher is very embedded in our learning expedition model. When we lost that position 2 years ago, it would have really torn apart that model in terms of our related arts teacher being really an integral part of our teaching and learning model. So we moved our health teacher, who was teaching all 3 grade levels for 3 years, every other day in health, into a related arts position. So the loss there, while a great add for our 7th grade teams, was our students having health from the same phenomenal teacher across all 3 years, which also had a significant impact on the our PE class sizes. So we had to, at the same time, for safety and sustainability reasons, create something sounds sort of similar to what Ben is referencing. We call it an X block, like an exploration block, where our teaching team of teachers has taken on an additional class where they are providing to students that are not their own, a different, same grade level, but a different team, to protect that common planning time. We're very complex at the middle school level scheduling. But they provide like yoga or photography or those exploration or intensive kinds of activities. So for us, it was the impact on health, and then we have been creative in trying to provide opportunities for that health teacher to have like a week or 2 weeks at different points in the year to provide instruction to the 8th grade and the 6th grade, because we see that obviously is extremely valuable. So that would be the impact at King.
You can see there are no very simple answers to these questions, but
Yeah.
so at Moore, we took a cut in family and consumer science, which had been a 7th grade related arts offering. So like King, we moved health to 7th grade, and then we're looking at having really 2 embedded related arts classes in 6th grade, 2 in 7th, and only 1 in 8th with art. So that's where we had to get into creating the elective classes that I spoke about earlier. And that was when we had a lower enrollment, actually. So for last year and going into this year, we thought we were going to be slightly lower. But what that meant is that the 6th grade computer science teacher teaches the 6th graders, and in addition teaches 2 sections of 8th grade. That's sustainable when you have smaller classes, but we have 186 graders. So right now that teacher has 186 graders, or slightly less. And then also two blocks of 8th graders. So looking ahead to next year, I'm starting to kind of rack my brain about how we're going to be able to continue with this model that teachers have grown to like in a very short time and kids love. But I'm trying to think about how to do that with less people. So to your point of like, where did that person go? We lost it. We sort of are patching it together. And now I'm looking ahead to next year and thinking, all right, we have to make changes to the schedule, and who else could teach an elective, and sort of pulling on a lot of different resources. So, but it's patchwork, and you can tell that there's an impact on schedule. There's an impact on a lot of people's jobs, whether that means changing a grade level or teaching different content. We're asking a lot of these people.
Can I follow up?
Of course.
I asked the question in part because this is the most, perhaps, the most, cut we've had to make in recent years. But then also my experience as a parent of a middle schooler at King is understanding how these related arts are so integral to the learning. And I'll just, if you bear with me for a second, I'll just use an example. My daughter's in 7th grade now, but in 6th grade, I believe her fall expedition was about leadership. And the core of the expedition was studying the civil rights movement to learn about leadership. And she had music as one of her related arts. And I was just stunned by how much that related art enriched her learning. So she, during those 6 months, the 6 months, she studied the music of the civil rights era. She learned to play songs on the ukulele. She learned how to use GarageBand. She learned, the class adapted the words of civil rights hymns, and talking about the role they played in the civil rights movement. They talked about them. They adapted the words to the modern day and to the struggle we all endure, or our youth are enduring more broadly today. And it was so rich. And I think when the board considered the cuts, the middle school cuts, they were termed electives. And it just struck me as now having a child in middle school and seeing the process of her learning how core the related arts are to her experience. And I've just just want to underscore, and then hearing what you all had to do in order to make what seemed at the time to be a kind of modest cut, but no
Sure.
modest compared to what was being asked of us, and to hear about the challenges that that the cut posed, in addition to, and the creativity with which you're using to adapt, I think is really a good, something I hope that the board reflects on as we move forward with next year's budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Burke and then Mr. Boffins.
Hey everyone, my first meeting, so I'm going to probably go longer than I should, but I'm going to use my newbie license to do so. First of all, I want to say thanks for all the good work that you're doing, and I was particularly excited to hear about how you're leveraging proficiency-based learning to go outside of the boxes, and I hope that's a growth edge for us in the entire district to think about how we can unbox how learning happens. It was part of my graduate work, and I really personally have seen the power of how rigorous learning can be through proficiency-based learning when we don't use it just to supplement teaching to the test and make it about teaching to the standards. I have one question about the Net Promoter Score. I'm curious if the qualitative information from people that put in detracting and neutral scores can be shared with us so we can understand what our growth edges are for that other 50. Well, it doesn't work out that way, but for the folks that are in that range of the scoring in the future. Is that permissible?
I don't think we have any qualitative data to.
You only get the numeric score?
Yep.
Okay. So generally a Net Promoter Score is best used when it asks how likely are you, and then why did you choose that number? Because that gives you the information you need to know how to bring people along the scale. So I don't know how we can effectively use the NPS without that information, quite honestly. So that said, a question for perhaps King, but perhaps everybody. I'm curious with the cruise and advisory. At first, I was impressed by seeing the numbers that 60 to 135 minutes per week is focused on advisory time, but that works out to 4 to 8 minutes per student to share per week. If you divide 60 by 15, it's 4 minutes each. So it actually it seems like it might be inadequate to do the social and emotional building that's necessary, particularly at such a critical developmental time. And I say that knowing that I have a lot of naivety to everything that's happening the other time. But I just know that we underfund and underprioritize social emotional learning at times and expect it to happen everywhere else all the time, and that doesn't fit either. So just curious if you could speak a little bit more about how that scaffolding's happening in crew time and kind of what the template is for things there. Thanks.
So that average was across the 3 middle schools, so that Aaron might be able to speak to that a little bit more, but those are chunks of time that are built into our schedule. So when I spoke about Visit King on a Tuesday morning, that's a 50-minute chunk of time that students are engaged in that academic support, that social emotional learning, team building, relationship building. So there's also other chunks of time that are focused on an academic support in that crew setting. So the idea also is that, in the spirit of this work, that whatever happens in crew, that's not an isolated, event or activity or conversation, that work is transferring into, I think I said like the fabric, the culture of the school. And I know that we spend time as an adult community making sure that our professional learning is aligned with the outcomes that we hope for students as a result of that effort and that time that we're putting in, so that it's not a if I'm in one classroom, I might be having this experience versus this classroom. There's common vision, common goals around that work, although we obviously make sure that we're meeting the needs of our individual crews and students. But ultimately, whatever's happening in those moments, whether it's Tuesday morning or at the end of the day on Friday, that's really transferring into how students are participating as members of the greater school community.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I just want to say at Lincoln, we're the lower end of the scale, the 60 minutes a week. So I think King is the higher end of the scale, the 135 minutes a week maybe. So to think about, we're newer at it, than King has been doing it for a really long time. And at Lincoln, our advisories are called Lions Prides because we're the Lincoln Lions, and Lions travel in prides. It's cute, right? But so our pride time, while it's 2 times a week, but only 30 minutes each. I would say that social emotional learning isn't, like Caitlin said, limited to that time. And so because of our house structure, that's inherent at how social emotional learning is happening all day long for our kids. And the 2-year loop is another reason why the relationship building, the connections, the team building that our house teams do to create a sense of belonging and for students and a sense of who we are within our school community as a collective. We focus on, on self-leadership, peer leadership, and community leadership throughout the 3 years. We have also added this year, our school counselors are doing social emotional lessons. They're pushing into classes and teaching lessons throughout the year to be more explicit, because what we know is that not all students are coming with the same level of knowledge and skills around social emotional learning that some students enter the door with from their families. So I think that the reason why, I agree with you, it's not enough, but our school day is also not long enough. I would just put a plug in there. And so when you think about trying to get all of this in to a really limited day in a way that feels doable, and also on the teacher side, how we fit the planning in and all of that, I think that that's why the house structure is so important. If we lost that and all of our social emotional learning and connection was being done through advisory and crew, it wouldn't do anything. Wouldn't be sufficient. But that, in addition to the house structure, is what allows us to maintain that work, which is why it's so important that we can keep it. So, thanks.
Yeah, please do. Never give a principal a microphone. So at Lyman Moore, we're in the middle, a little over 100 minutes a week, and we brought advisory back to the school 3 years ago after a bit of a hiatus. And part of the rationale there was that a lot of teachers care a ton about kids, right? And that sometimes it's the math teacher that's going to really connect with the kid, and sometimes it's the art teacher, and and we had a lot of teachers saying, like, well, yeah, I spend a lot of time in class, connecting with kids and having them reflect on pieces of how they're developing as a person. And that's awesome, and that continues. But when in adding advisory, we were adding another layer, another net to connect kids or to collect and make sure that they're not dropping. And so our groups are intentionally a little smaller. They're 10, 11, 12. Everybody in the building has one, including myself. And really our structures and our schedule were built for the purpose. So we start the week with 30 minutes in advisory to transition in from the weekend, and we end the week with 30 minutes of advisory to transition out of the school week and to the weekend. Each morning we start in advisories and we eat together. And for this school year, our leaders council, our leadership team, actually voted to change the schedule up and bring some supported study, academic, like a study hall, supported study hall time to the morning right after advisory, and to keep kids largely in those groups with their advisors. So effectively sort of expanding that time that person could continue to connect with that kid and help them academically. So in a short time, it's become a real vehicle for supporting kids, and knowing that 100 minutes isn't enough. 100 hours a week wouldn't be enough for some of these students and what they need, but we find that 100 is working pretty well.
Thank you all. Thanks for standing your ground on what's most important too when the cuts are getting pretty deep, and for everything you do with limited resources.
Mr. Boffins, and then Ms. Bondo.
Okay, so how does the middle school model differ from the junior high school model, just generally, and then as it relates to things like teaming, crew, and related arts?
So I'd say just kind of briefly, maybe the most apt comparison is thinking about kind of our comprehensive high schools where a kid shows up and they go from one class to another, different kids, different teachers. Those teachers don't necessarily connect with one another or have structures to connect that. So I think that's probably the shortest version of saying, we interrupted that by creating these teams. And I think we've seen, right, obviously at Portland High, the ninth grade structure as one that's kind of trying to mimic some of this teaming model. At the ninth grade as a supportive transition for kids in. But I think the best, simplest way is just like junior high was just kind of like high school, and it started a little later typically. It was like seventh grade, kind of seventh through ninth. But it was kids showed up to school, went to 6 different classes. Those teachers may or may not have had a connection, may not been the same group of kids, and that was their day.
Ms. Bondo?
My question was about the teaming. And when I see we have a house, we have 2 houses. I mean, when you look at each houses, you have 4 courses. I mean, the math, science, language. So that means we have teachers, 1 teacher for each house going with the same course, and then another teacher for the 8th grader, right? So we have a total, like for math, we have 3 teachers across the middle school. So we have a total like 12 teachers. We have 6. You got 6 math.
Because there's 2 per grade level.
Yes, exactly. But you have the same teacher who goes with the 6th to 7th grade, right? With the same student, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, and when I look at the EOL, the language learner student, I'm wonder about, when I look at the percentage on the King Middle School, we have 31%. And I try to understand that because you should have those students on those houses. I mean, house 1, house 2. So how many of those EAL student teachers you have also giving some structure? Because those are the students and we need to make them ready to try to reduce the achievement gap. And I wonder how many we do have to try to reduce those gaps, because if they are nowhere prepared, because that structure is really condensing the student. So we have less student in the class and more focus on the learning target. So about those students, what kind of structure support then we do have, and how many teachers we have for those specific students. Especially King, you have 31%, so that means
Yes.
you are almost the one.
So at King, there is an ELL teacher per grade level that is supporting students in those mainstream classes and supporting teachers. So co-planning and supporting teachers. We also have a significant number of students that are newcomers, that are new to the United States. So we have 2 teachers that teach students for a portion of their day in an intensive English language immersion class. So they spend part of their day there, but also have access to other mainstream classes in physical education and crew and advisory and those parts of their day until they demonstrate that they're ready for a different level of support from the ELL grade level case managers. So they're receiving support. It's just at different levels until their access scores demonstrate that they're ready to just be monitored versus receiving support every day in class and in a structured academic support time.
So that means you have 2 teachers for the language acquisition for each house, or just for both houses?
For the school.
For the school, 2 language, just 2?
Excuse me, those are for brand new to the country, students brand new, just learning English. We have 5 teachers that are supporting ELL students.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes, which is a little bit different than the other 2 schools, just based on the number of new arrivals that we have at King. But the structure of how ELL instruction is delivered at the 3 middle schools is the same. Yeah.
And I would just quickly jump in and say that we do the ratios. We look at. Am I on? Okay. the number of ELL teachers we assign per building is based on the number
On the ratio.
Yes, and in that we also look at both the total number of students and then the complexity levels. So we consider how many of those students are identified as McKinney-Vento, are new to the country, SLIFE, et cetera.
Okay.
So King has the most of the 3 middle schools.
All right.
Really quick, I'll be very quick. We have at Lincoln and at Lyman Moore a lower percentage of ELL students than King does. But within the percentage of students that we have the same scope of proficiency levels. So there might be fewer, but those students still sit in our classes, and we do try to balance them across the 2 houses as we create a house team that looks like our school. So that's why I'm going to go back to the common planning time, because we have only 3 ELL teachers in our school for all proficiency levels of kids that we serve. So those teachers they can't be with the kids in the classes all the time. And we want our students to have access to grade level standards in their core curriculum. And so that's why the ELL teachers must have a time that they can plan with the teachers in order to help the teachers know how to meet their needs and how to scaffold for their language needs within their content and within their class. And that's another reason why this whole structure works the way it does, which allows for that collaborative time. So the 2 social studies teachers at 1 grade level can work with the ELL teacher because that's a time when they can talk about the standards and the assessments and the planning they're trying to do and scaffold for the variety of language needs.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You just answered my second question. Thank you.
Good. I'm so glad.
So I wanted to queue up if any of the student reps wanted to share anything. Go ahead, Mr. Casio-Reyes.
So as a student who went through the budget cuts in 8th grade, I found that the 1 quarter in related arts, I found that very helpful because I got to know a lot of the students in that class from both houses. And in those quarters, I learned a lot as well, because I feel like that year was the most memorable year I've had in related arts, because I feel if it's like a whole year of just one thing, it starts to forget in my mind. But if it's just 1 quarter, it starts to stick in my mind, because I still remember a lot of the stuff I learned in it from 8th grade. And I found that system very helpful.
Thank you. If no one else, Mr. Atkinson, go ahead.
I just want to mention something that I haven't heard talked about. It's not really a question. My apologies. I hope that's all right. But when we talk about connectedness, inclusion, meaningful relationships, students being held, safety nets, I think there's a real aspect of safety of our schools that's enhanced by all of those aspects of this support structure and this model. And so I would be concerned to lose that. I don't know if board members or others have had a chance to look at the Secret Service report on targeted school violence, but the majority of students who have come and enacted violence against their schools have been bullied or have been pushed out by their schools, and it strikes me that all of these support structures and all of this tight knitting of community is part of what's keeping our students safe, both in middle school and as they advance to high school, having those social and emotional skills and knowing appropriate and healthy ways to deal with issues. I think is something that's keeping our students safe. So as we consider this and as we think about our model in this age group, I hope that we'll keep that in mind as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. If no one else has questions, I have a couple of things I wanted to throw out there. First of all, if I could have just a quick little summary explanation of the way that clubs and other activities that students take part of that are not necessarily part of the schedule, how they work into this, and also when they take place. My daughter's a sixth grader in Lyman Moore, so I have a sense, but I think it would be helpful, particularly before my next
Maybe
question,
just
to hear this.
One quick, yeah.
Just one of us. Okay. All right. So Caitlin talked a little bit about the flex block that they've added at King, and that's a little bit of an answer to bringing co-curriculars into the school day, but I would say that's the exception. So across schools, we're doing co-curricular offerings after school, and so those are all sorts of sports offerings and a lot of things that were available in school probably for a lot of us, everything from, yearbook and math team and, civil rights team and things like that. I think one piece that we've worked at, I think in parallel, but with intention, has been to respond to student interests. So I think all of us inherited some systems in our schools where a club had to get going and kind of show that it was going, and then it would become official over a period of time, which doesn't really work when you have kids just for 3 years and when their interests are emerging. So all of our schools have a responsive way to create clubs if kids want to do them. If we have a group of kids and we have an adult who's willing to sponsor it and help make it happen, then we make it happen. And so those are all outside of the school day. I would say a sprinkling in the morning, but most after school. And all of our schools provide late bus transportation that gets most kids home. But that's my short answer.
Yeah, and so I guess what I was thinking as well was in the discussions of how to redo your schedule and how to work with some of the unfortunate cuts that the board had to go through a couple of years ago. Was the discussion or part of the thought process was to try to use maybe either unstructured creative time or even have some of those clubs and co-curriculars during the school day, maybe with the intent to increase participation for some of the students that might not be able to do so early or after school?
So both Casco Bay and King have tried that, and I think it's a model worth considering. It would address a bunch of issues of access within school communities. It could then push something else out, or it would have to be a trade-off in our schedules, but it's certainly something we're considering.
Absolutely, yeah. And like you said, as students come up with ideas and things that they have interest in, the list is never ending. Students, especially as we, like you said earlier, as we try to keep up with the times, new things come up.
You should ask your daughter about our board right now at Lyman Moore. It's the question of the week is, what club do you want at school? So it's covered with 74 ideas of what kids want.
Yeah. I ask, and it's like pulling teeth sometimes. It's so hard.
I'll send you a picture of what's
everything's
on
fine,
there.
Dad. Going great. It's so much fun. This is I'm just beginning. Don't forget, I have a 22-year-old daughter. I've been through this song and dance before. So I guess my next question is a little bit different topic, more about discipline. And so I'm glad that Jake is here, because Jake is helping to guide some of the Parent Advisory Committee subcommittee work on discipline work. And as we know, we've seen the data, this board has seen the data of our high schools and some of the disproportionate representation of students of color and economically disadvantaged students as they represent out-of-school suspension rates. Do we have the same disparities in our middle schools?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. And so I guess my question is, how much does this model and how much does the extra common planning time from the leadership teams help us to address those disparities?
Well, I think one piece of that answer is those disparities exist. We've had the model in place, right? So I think this is where this is layered into the equity work, right? And beginning to dig into how that, unpacking why those are happening. So I don't know if there's one quick, kind of story that anybody wants to take up about just how you're digging into that. But
I didn't expect there to be a quick answer to it.
I can just give like very quick example of how that the teaming structure is allowing us to, like Aaron said, to recognize and problem solve and build some strategy around that. When that team time is happening, we are able to be really strategic about the people that are at the table when we're talking about students. So teachers can talk about students all day long, every day, but using that team time to make sure that our assistant principals, that our guidance counselors, our social workers, parents are able to be part of those conversations is really supportive of addressing very specific student needs. So those conversations aren't happening by chance at 3:30 in the hallway with a couple of people. They're able to really use that team time to address specific student needs. That's not answering the whole disparity question, but that's looking at how we can use that teaming structure to address a need that we all have.
Yeah.
Can I jump in really quickly?
No, that was just me. It was just me.
All right. No. So across schools, we're also doing equity literacy work. So starting last year, Barrett Wilkinson has been leading a district effort to really put this stuff out on the table. And so I think we have structures in place to address it. And we're not seeing the growth yet, but we're really, Barrett started that work 15 months ago. And so I would expect to see the gaps change. And I think that the fact that we're meeting together and that we're staying with kids for 2 years gives us opportunities as adults to own that we may have been part of the issue with a kid or with a family, and then to help address that. And I think if it were a touch point here, a different group there, different teachers here, I think, that opens the door for, frankly, like all the terrible stuff that's happening for some of our kids to just go unchecked by a team of adults who are now going to be accountable to each other around this stuff. And there's a growing appetite for that in the district. So as leaders, we're committed to it. Teachers in our buildings are committed to doing it differently and recognizing it and owning their part of it. And I think we're going to see this change in time, and kids are really demanding it at this point too, and they're aware. So I think we're primed with structures to support a real shift in this.
Yeah.
And I was just going to quickly say that from the Gorski conversation, he talked a lot about how it's ultimately ideological, and that challenge is true for us pre-K through 12. But the middle schools are poised structurally to be embedding what we're learning, I think, in a unique way as compared to our other grade spans.
Yeah. And so, interestingly, a lot of my, and I'm about to wrap it up because I was hoping we'd finish with this around 8:30, which puts me about 30 seconds to go. I'll take more than 30 seconds. So interestingly, part of Mr. Gorski's discussion it's been, like I said earlier, he kind of speaks my language, right? A lot of what he was saying and the way they interpreted equity and the sense of urgency with which we need to address some of these issues and some of these disparities is the way that I think we need to do it. And as much as I recognize the value of our related arts offerings, I want to think that there is immense value as well for having unstructured creative time for our students, and that lends itself potentially to open avenues to address some of these disparities. And again, I can't tell you the specifics of that because I'm just a parent in a school. I'm not a teacher, not an administrator in our buildings. But to me, those are the things that I really want us to focus on. Because my kid, I would consider her a privileged kid in our school district. That honestly, regardless of which of these classes she participates on, she's going to do quite well. Because she's got two really engaged, supportive parents. She's got financial stability in our home. She's got access to health care. She's got all these things that some of our students don't have the privileges of having. And so what I want us is to really pay a lot of attention and a lot of focus to those students, the ones that traditionally do fall through the cracks. And then ultimately, if the board should have to consider any kind of cuts like we did 2 years ago, the parents that are going to show up and advocate for these related arts offerings are the parents that are in my peer groups, the very privileged ones. The ones that are not necessarily going to show up are the ones that do fall through the cracks. And I'm not entirely sure what is it that we need to invest on, or what is it that we need to potentially, consider for cuts to open the avenues for us to narrow those disparities or to eliminate those disparities. I'm really happy to hear that we feel confident and optimistic about the direction that we're heading and that we're aware of those issues. I'm really happy of the work that we're doing through the Parent Advisory Committee, and that this is something that has a lot of energy behind it. And like I've said in the past, this is something that I'm really passionate about. So you can definitely count on our support as we move that forward. So having said that, thank you so much for the presentation. Oh, Ms. Victor. It's 8:32. I'm kidding. Ms. Victor, go for it.
Sorry, and I have more to say about related arts because I wouldn't dismiss them in quite the same way. I do think that some kids are able to relate to school through a related art. The 4 subjects might be challenging for them, but a related art can open up education for them. And what we're talking about related arts are again, we're not talking about elective. I mean, it's really some core instructional areas like art, which art and music, and health. I've heard nothing but how sex ed sucks in recent days. But my question is this: it's about recess. I hear a lot from my own child about not being able to get outside all day, and I also hear from other parents asking, why don't middle school students have recess? And I don't know the answer, so I'm sorry for raising an additional question, but that is my question.
I mean, I would just say, it was spoken to earlier, I think by Sue Ellen, just the tension of trying to do all that needs to get done, and just the priority of making sure kids have enough access to the grade level content. I mean, we'll hear, and I think, we're coming up on some, presentations around core instructional work and so forth. And again, I think we'll see how the middle schools are helped positioned to leverage that. But I think as well, we're all acknowledging we're not where we want to be, particularly for our most underserved kids. And that the thing that they need most is continued access to instruction. There's nothing that makes up for it besides access to instruction and more time on learning. And so, it's just a choice. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So again, thank you so much for the presentation. Appreciate your work, as always. Next, new business. Here we go. Consideration and action to appoint. Why do I always transpose the letters of your name? I'm so sorry for that. That's so rude. Consideration and action to appoint Mark Balfans to serve on the District Advisory Building Committee. Is there a motion? Ms. Thompson, second by Ms. Bondo.
That's the first read.
Oh, that is a first read. Excuse me. That's just a. I thought we were moving that forward. It's just a first read. So I don't know if it is the first read. Yep. All right. We'll vote on that next meeting.
I'm sorry, maybe it's not a first read. I thought it was a first read. I know I have it in my notes for the 17th, but did you think we were advancing it today?
Yeah.
Okay, then I'm absolutely fine for you to advance it. I think Mr. Balfans is here, you're all here.
Yeah. And it's what I had communicated to the board.
Who did the motion?
So I'm sorry, who motioned it? Ms. Thompson, and then second by Ms. Bondo. Are you prepared to speak to the motion,
Nope.
Mr. Superintendent?
Oh, actually, I am.
Thank you,
yes.
Ms. Thompson.
So tonight, we're asking you to approve naming board member Mark Balfans to serve as one of 3 board representatives on the District Advisory Building Committee, replacing board member Lori Davis, who, as you know, retired. The District Advisory Building Committee advises the school board on all issues related to the rebuilding of our 4 elementary schools under the Buildings for Our Future bond. The DABC includes 2 other board members, Sarah Thompson, who co-chairs it, along with Councilor Justin Costa and Member Emily Figdor. The appointment is intended to be for the duration of the projects unless the board member departs the board, as in the case of Ms. Davis. And the DABC also has 2 council representatives and 6 community representatives.
Thank you, Superintendent. Are there any questions on the motion? Seeing none, any public comment on the motion? Seeing none, any board discussion? Mr. Atkinson.
I just want to thank Member Balfons for stepping up and filling this position. This is important work, and I appreciate your willingness to take on the additional burden.
Thank you. Any other board discussion? Seeing none, I'll double down on that as well. I've told you already, Mr. Balfons, thank you so much for stepping up. I think Ms. Thompson, also thank you for putting the word out there and helping us, quote unquote, recruit to fill in this seat. And I'm really happy that Mr. Balfons will be taking this on. So way to step up. Having said that, all those in favor of appointing Mark Balfons to serve on the District Advisory Building Committee, please indicate. And that's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. Thank you. All right, next, we don't have any personnel items on the agenda tonight. And given that it's before the hour of 10 p.m., it's 8:37 p.m. Is there any public comment on items not on this evening's agenda? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment portion. Is there a motion to adjourn the business meeting? Ms. Figdor, second by Mr. Burke. I gotta give it to him. Put him in the minutes. All those in favor, please indicate. It's unanimous with the students voting with the majority. We've adjourned at 8:38 p.m.